This CPU over here is a big problem. Big problem because it's got 192 threads and 96 cores. Have you ever heard of a 96 core CPU?
I think we're on the verge of a major climate shift.
Yes, you can go to the shop, go on Amazon and buy it. I mean, I dare you to look at the price point because your day's gonna go a lot worse when you see the price point. So don't go in the description and look at the links. The question I have is, how good is this 96 core CPU then for creators? Because it's obviously not for gamers. And how does it compare to the 9950X Ryzen CPU? The cheap, your normal desktop CPU. If you're one of those cheapskates, will you even be in this league with this Ryzen Threadripper? That's what I wanted to know. After continuing my review, I realized there's another button in the BIOS that you can turn on. And then this guy goes to an absolute beast mode. Let's go. It's so annoying. I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars to just change my Windows wallpaper just because my Windows isn't licensed. Well, why don't you try Hookeys? That's a ton cheaper. And if you use the code TN20, you get it even cheaper. What do you mean? How do I get it and how is it possible? Well, see this video here, or the one you're watching. Click in the link on the video description, add the Windows 11 CD product to the cart, proceed to checkout, add the code TN20 for the extra discount. So what, the Windows 11 Pro OEM key is just $23.22? Yeah. Choose the preferred payment option and complete the purchase. The key will be available on the purchased orders in a few moments. Copy the key and paste it into your Windows activation settings, and you're all done. Oh, that was easy. Is that Ryan Gosling? No. Anyway, by the way, the same discount code also works website-wide, so go check out other products. Maybe like Microsoft Office. So then, let's take a look at the specs first of all. If you're not familiar with Threadripper Pro, then it's actually in this PC right here, and we're gonna test it out in a minute. But looking at the specs compared to the Intel's best and AMD's consumer best. Okay, our Core Ultra 285K has 24 cores and 24 threads. So there's single thread per core. And if you didn't know that already, the more, the better. But apparently sometimes multi-threading, because what you can have is SMT or multi-threading on a CPU, you can have 2 threads per core. It's not always faster, and Intel has opted to a different direction with their newest CPU, and they have 1 thread per core. AMD has 2 threads per core, so they have less threads, and they're all performance cores, so you have 16 performance cores in here, and then 2 threads per core. All of the 24 cores on Intel aren't performance cores. There's 8 performance cores and 16 efficiency cores. On the 7995WX, we have 96 cores and 192 threads. That's bonkers to say the least. Now, the turbo frequency on Intel and AMD is 5.7 GHz, but on the Threadripper is 5.1 GHz, so 600 MHz drop. But it's still very impressive considering that this is on a Threadripper, on a high-end desktop platform, often that you can see still such high clock speeds. Bear in mind, this is based on the Ryzen 7000 architecture rather than the Ryzen 9000. And another thing to highlight here is the PCIe lanes. On the desktop, we have 24 PCIe Gen 5, but on here we have 128. That's mental. In terms of cache, we're running 384 megabytes cache, and then the L2 cache is 96 megabytes. That's absolutely ridiculous amount of cache for this CPU. The base TDP is 350 watts, an asterisk into there because you'll see in a minute. You can see that the process node is still on the 5nm TSMC. In terms of Testbench Setup, I was using this over here for the Threadripper, which we have the Gigabyte TRX 50 Aero D motherboard. We're using an RTX 4090 from Zotac. We're using 128 gigabytes of RAM running at 6400 megahertz. And the RDIMMs are not the usual RAM. They run at a different voltage, so you can't actually put normal RAM into there. You have to get RDIMMs for that, DDR5. We're using NMAX LickTech 2 for 360mm AIO. That's cooling this beast. And a 1600 watt power supply from Seasonic. And also, as you can see here, for the OS drive, we're using the Samsung 990 Pro because it's still very, very fast. If you want to check out my AMD and Intel setups, check them out in the video description below. Let's move on to, firstly, the memory controller. Now, this 7995WX has an 8-channel memory compared to the Ryzen 9 on the desktop, which has dual channel. So even though you have 4 DIMM sticks in there, it's actually using 2 channels, and the 2 channels are split between the 4 DIMM slots, if that makes sense. Now, on this threadripper platform, we have 8 DIMM channels. So if you have a very RAM intensive workflow, you want 8 channels or as many channels as you can for your CPU, because it will just make RAM speed faster and you can have more of it. I have 128 gigabytes just to not cap any of my benchmarks. 64 would have been fine as well. You can get up to 2 terabytes onto this. And I've got something in the pipeline that you might want to see. Subscribe if you know what I mean. Now, the stock for what AMD says is actually 5200 megahertz on a normal RDIMM, actually. The thing is, because it's got the separate channel per DIMM, you can easily run it a lot faster. As you can see, we're running 6400 megatransfers per second, and it's absolutely no problem, not a single crash. It is stable as whatever. You can probably run it even faster, but that's not the point in here. The Ryzen 9 9950X goes to 5600, so a little bit faster. You can still run it faster, but the stock is a little bit faster than Ryzen 7000 because it's a little bit an older architecture. But because of the more channels, 8 channels, we can run them a lot faster. It's got a lot more RAM support and faster RAM support and more expensive RAM support. Now, power consumption out of the stock settings, it pulls 350 watts. Okay, it's quite a lot, as you well aware of, compared to this guy, which pulls only 200, and Intel that pulls roughly around 250. And we've been complaining that Intel pulls a lot of power. Stick around till the end of the video. Now, the idle power consumption is actually very, very high. It pulls quite a bit at idle, and that's just one of the quirks that you're gonna have to go with. When you buy a Bugatti, you're not gonna be bothered about the power consumption. You just fill the tank up and then go for it, okay? And it's the case here with the 7995WX. It pulls a lot more power at full utilization and at idle. So we've got the Ryzen and AMD. So let's take a look at some of these creator benchmarks and if it's actually worth it and how good does it perform. Here's Cinebench R24, and single core is actually 22% faster than the 9950X. Yet the multi-core score is 65% slower. Let me put it the other way. It's almost 3 times as fast as the 9950X. Yes, almost 3 times as fast as the best multi-core CPU that you can find on the market, basically. On Intel, we've got 33% faster single-core performance and 61% slower multi-core performance. Again, 2.5 times faster performance than on the Intel 285K. Moving on to Geekbench 6, and here we can see that the 9950X is 23% faster than the single-core score, which is roughly about the same, but the multi-core score is actually 16% slower, not a ton slower, and that's because Geekbench doesn't know what to do with all these cores. The 96 cores is too much for Geekbench 6, okay? So that's that, and you can see the same on Intel, 18% faster on the single-core score, and about 9% slower in the multi-core score, so not that much slower on the multi-core score. Moving on to Geekbench AI CPU benchmark, and here we can see, again, interesting reasoning. I don't know if it's core limited or single core limited, but we can see that the 9950X is more than double the performance in any of these benchmarks. I mean, the multi benchmark is actually almost 10 times as fast as the 7995WX, which is just, I don't know, ridiculous. Quantized, everything's a lot faster on the AMD. The Intel is actually slower than all of them. I mean, the multi-score kind of looks weird on the 9950X. Either it's fully built for that CPU, that benchmark, or utilizes this, but it's 4 times faster than Intel, which is ridiculous. The single is a little bit faster on the Intel compared to the 9950X, and then the same quantized is roughly about the same. But on AI, I don't know why, in this particular benchmark is not good. But when we're talking about AI, this is not really the benchmark you want to see here, because if you want to do this for AI, you can do a lot more of that in a different way. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's take a look at photo editing application. Photoshop 9950X 55% faster. That's a lot better, and Intel about 22% faster. So don't really get that for Photoshop, because Photoshop doesn't know what to do with the 96 cores. Lightroom Classic, again, very much single-threaded performance. In some cases not, but 96 cores too much for Lightroom to handle, doesn't know what to do with it, and is quite a bit slower in all of the cores. Probably because it doesn't know which core to use. There's too many of them, and you can see that the 9950X and 285K, they're quite a bit faster, over 60% faster than what we have here. What about video editing though? And here we have interesting results. We can see some performance increase now. The 9950X is slower in every single way, about 3 to 10% slower in the overall scores. Long GOP is about 12% slower. Intel, interestingly, is actually faster than the AMD, 2 to 6% faster, and about 13% faster in the long GOP scores. Is it worth for Premiere Pro? Again, not particularly, because even in Premiere Pro, there is kind of a core limit, and at that point, you really want a hardware accelerated certain system that can accelerate this, and because the 285K has iGPU, it can utilize Intel QuickSync and is a little bit better in some of these timeline performances. What about After Effects? Because here we have a lot of RAM and we can be a lot faster. Interestingly, it's not that much faster. You can see that the multi-core score is a ton faster, about 25% faster. The rest of the scores and overall score isn't that much faster. Like tracking is 20% faster on the 9950X and about 10% faster on the 285K. In some ways, it's not worth it, but at the same time, if you want to use RAM preview, this guy supports so much more than Intel and AMD on the consumer platform, and having the 9950X for After Effects might be worth it. In certain cases, even the rendering is worth it on this one, just because it supports so much faster multi-core rendering because there's so many cores. But feels again a little bit of an overkill for just After Effects. I think this CPU is meant for something else. What about DaVinci Resolve? Here we can see 9950X is 12 to 19% slower in the overall scores. Some of the individual scores go up to 30% slower. Interframe extended, for example, about 28% slower, which is quite a bit. Intel, again, quite a bit slower. Long GOP, 33% slower. So yes, it is faster, but in terms of price point and cores, you're paying a lot more. And I feel like still for DaVinci Resolve, it's not really worth the money. I feel like the other platforms are more worth it, and perhaps putting the budget on a better GPU might be a better option there. But now, the bread and butter for this CPU. Moving on to Blender. And what you can see here is an absolute slaughterhouse. 9950X is 71% slower in pretty much Monster, Junk Shop, Classroom, any scene. That is ridiculous, absolute bonkers result. This 7995WX is more than 3 times as fast as the rest of them. More than 3 times. I mean, it's not like 30%, 40%. No, not that. 3 times as fast. It's absolutely ridiculous. Moving on to V-Ray, another 3D application, and you can see 70% slower 9950X, 70.1% slower 285K. This guy here is more than 3 times as fast as the competition. Now, you're wondering, what about my 3D application? What I've seen online and what I've researched is pretty much every single 3D application what you can do has similar results. The scaling is about that, what you can see in here. 3D applications, usually without a CPU-based rendering, they scale very much the same. As you can see, Blender and V-Ray, same results, different programs. So V-Ray is chaos. But if you use any other rendering engines out there, you can expect similar results. So what is this CPU for then? This CPU is for not Photoshop or photo editing, not really for video editing. Yes, it could put video together, and if you want to have a rendering farm, it's one of the best CPUs out there. If it's just purely software rendering, if you want to put video together, there is no competition for that. Where this CPU really shines is the actual 3D applications. 3D rendering, it's ridiculous. The RAM support you can put on it, it's absolutely ridiculous. If you're someone like Damien Guilleminault, who we built the PC, a couple of years ago, who's a 3D Marvel artist, then this is probably very, very exciting CPU for you. Damien, you're watching this? Shout out to you. And I've seen some other guys as well online. If you're wondering who this is for professionals who do a lot of 3D and working and rendering on this, and they need a lot of RAM and so on. Also, in very scientific workflows where you need some simulations or calculations and some big simulations, auto engineering or liquids or oil or something like that, then sometimes you need this, and then the price point becomes irrelevant because there's a lot more at stake quick than this. It's absolutely ridiculous in there. And there's no competition in terms of multi-core performance for this CPU. But like I said, there is a button in the BIOS that when turned on, something's gonna happen. So what you can see right now is we're in the BIOS and we go to advanced mode, which is F7, I believe. Then what we'll go here is XMP profile. Right now, I'm gonna leave that off because that doesn't really change anything for us. We don't wanna see that. What we're gonna go to here is advanced CPU settings. Okay, we go a little bit down. There's something called precision boost overdrive. We hit OK. Right now it's auto. What we want to go here is advanced. You can just press enable, but advanced will be nicer. PBO limits, we're going to set this to motherboard. So the motherboard is going to decide how to do it. If you feel like I'm explaining anything wrong, please correct me in the comment section below. We're going to leave that at auto. Boost clock override, we're going to just press that as positive. Max CPU clock override, we're just going to go to whatever is the maximum, 200. Platform throttle limit, we're going to put that to 96 degrees. And we're just going to press F10. That will save, and then Bob's your uncle. Now hold on to your seats because something's about to go down. So we're in Cinebench right now, and I'm gonna press go on the multi-core and then get hardware info open over here and check out the CPU package power draw here. 320 watts, 678 watts, 683 watts, 672, 667. It's pulling 680 watts. That's ridiculous if you didn't get that already, okay? I want to try V-Ray as well. It did go to 96 degrees, 696. Come on, hit that 700. Actually, when I tested it, I saw it 707 watts. The only thing that I changed was 96 degrees thermal limit rather than 95. Or it could be that because I've done it for so long here, the ambient temperature here is a lot higher. Ooh, these VRMs are hot. Oh my goodness. 141. So basically we got roughly around 40% increase in the scores compared to what I showed you earlier. Earlier we got 104,000, something like that. 141%. That's between 35 to 40% increase in performance. So as you can see, this Threadripper Pro CPU can actually be also overclocked, which is absolutely bonkers. Now, this is just enabling PBO and let the motherboard decide how much power it can run through. But the thing is, if you wanted to, you can absolutely do it yourself and go mental. But as a professional, you probably just want to maybe flick the PBO on and do that. And lastly, the one thing that actually sets this CPU apart is the 128 PCIe Gen 5 lanes. That means that on your motherboard, whichever slot you have, if you go with the Asus WRX90 motherboard, you have lots of PCIe slots, all of them X16 slot PCIe Gen 5. You can populate them all with GPUs and create an absolute insane rendering machine. Hit subscribe if you want to see that. Which is absolutely, there's nothing like that on the market. CPU, GPU rendering, whatever. So you want to add something to it, NVMEs, storage, whatever, you can do it. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that's why this is so much more expensive than the mainstream CPUs, because if you're building a workstation, there is nothing like it. But the trouble is, and the problem is, it costs more than my car. So would you have a car or this CPU? Comment below. Bye-bye.